I said, these are the values that are going to make me successful here at Amazon. And for me, it was fortitude. It's my passion. It's my creativity for creating processes, and it's grace. And the reason why I call it grace is for my grandmother. And the one thing I learned in my entire career is you needed to treat others the way you wanted to be treated. You can't come in here and tell people what to do. And you can't tell them they're doing something wrong. You need to work with them and respect them because the way they're doing it is they created their culture.
Welcome to this week's Treasury Career Corner podcast, where I interview Treasury professionals about their Treasury careers. Each and every week, I'll talk to treasurers about how they built their careers, where they are now, where they see both themselves and the Treasury profession going to next. Let's get on with the show. And this is a special milestone episode for me. After 7 years, every single week, without a gap, we've hit the milestone of episode 400. And I'm delighted, thrilled to say I'm joined by one of my old clients, actually, Tony Masone. Is that how I say it correctly, sir?
You got it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I wanted to nail that. I was going to ask you before the show, but I thought, just go in with it. Tony is, as you guys will know, the VP Treasurer and Enterprise Risk Management at Amazon. Amazon, as you guys know, is guided by 4 principles: customer obsession rather than competitor focus, passion for invention, commitment to operational excellence, and long-term thinking. Driven by the excitement of building technologies, inventing products, and providing services that change lives, Amazon embrace new ways of doing things, making decisions quickly and not afraid to fail. I'm going to let Tony explain a little bit more about Amazon and some of the principles that you guys also live by, and you can explain this a bit. But obviously, I know Tony, we've known each other for many years. If you would, Tony, someone listening today, junior guys, take us back to we'll go through your career journey, how you first started in finance. I know we spoke recently about how you did a great session in New York, which was fascinating. Take us back to the dim, distant past and then bring us through to now. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for being here. I've been trying to get on your podcast for the last 7 years, but I've never been asked.
Oh my goodness.
But I'm very honored to be the 400th or to be here today. And hopefully I can add some insight to some treasury tips here and there of what I've learned over the years. But, for me, my career really started in public accounting. And I go back, like most of my peers, back to the public accounting stage, because there really isn't a path to treasury right out of college. It just doesn't happen. And so for me, the love for treasury started at a very young age, as being the treasurer for my class at university, and then my internship at Clairol, where I worked my first internship was in the treasury department, and I worked in the AR department. I got a good feel for how the banks operate, reconciling the daily cash receipts, putting together the batches, and then push them over to accounts receivable so they can actually process all the payments in and post the receipts. So I got a good feel for the money side. And then I got to know the treasurer really well. And it was fun to kind of hear what treasury did. So in the back of my mind, treasury was always there, but it wasn't what I was studying. There's not a course that says Treasury 101. Yeah. And that's things that you learn as you progress in your career and you start to do things. So we think about the KPMG days of audit, get to learn how to read a balance sheet, get to learn how to read a cash flow statement, get to learn how to put one together. You get to learn about controls, what makes a good, strong control, what makes a weak process, what's a strong process, what's a weak process, testing it and making sure that you can kind of say, this is a strong control environment. We feel good about it. The numbers are accurate and report. So great learnings. And if you think about the companies that we audited as a 22-year-old, like I'm auditing GE, PepsiCo, Combustion Engineering, Xerox. I mean, these companies are enormous.
Yeah.
And as a 22-year-old, you get to see all that. So for me, it kind of gave me a good insight to finance, which is great. And I think for me, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do it any differently. I think public accounting is a great foundation. It's like getting your master's in finance. So I kind of look at it as a good stepping stone.
And then but you touched on there that you got some exposure to Treasury. Did you then think, hey, Treasury's for me, or how did it sort of grow in your mind, if you like?
Yeah. So if you think about, I used to audit SNLs, right? Saving and loans, banks when they started crashing. So
Yes.
like, I kind of got a feel for what it was like, but I got to kind of feel of the financial side and the banking side. And if you think about Treasury, you do work with banks. And I look at my job as the main banker for Amazon, right? So my organization within Amazon is the bank for Amazon. We're the ones who are funding them. We're the ones that make sure we have enough liquidity. So from my perspective, when I was auditing the banks, I had that in the back of my mind that I really like this stuff. As you're going through testing the loan reserves, testing the liquidity that they had, going through the regulatory requirements, and kind of getting a feel for what it was all about. But I still enjoyed the manufacturing side as well, because I grew up on the manufacturing side, and auditing a manufacturing operations is really neat as well. But where it all came to fruition was at PepsiCo. So I left public accounting. I went to PepsiCo and I did internal audit. And PepsiCo was one of my clients at KPMG. So I had a feel for the culture there, and I loved the culture. And the thing is, though, you pull up in Purchase and you see the beautiful campus of PepsiCo, you're like, wow, I really want to work here. And then you walk down into the gym, you're like, wow, this is really nice. And you're like, what are you, 25 years old at this point? And you're like, I can see myself here.
Yeah.
So I decided to join internal audit as another learning experience for me to learn more about PepsiCo and how they operate. And what was nice about PepsiCo is you got both operational audit experience and financial audit experience. So if you think about on the KPMG side, it was all financial audits. And then all of a sudden you're walking into operational audits and you're actually learning how they manufacture products and how a product is put together and what the cost elements of a product are. And that's fascinating to me. And just from a finance perspective, and it's like, okay, you have a can of Pepsi. It costs you $1 to buy that in the store, but what makes up the cost of that Pepsi? So now you have the raw materials, you have the advertising. And then when you realize like everything that goes into that Pepsi can, the biggest cost to a Pepsi is advertising. Like I would never have known that as a 25-year-old until you got into this role and you get to learn what makes up a product and how you sell a product. So going a little bit past my 2 years in audit, or everyone does 2 to 3 years and then they roll out to a job. My last audit was in Treasury, and I was doing the audit for Seth Marlowe, who ended up hiring me into the Treasury Department and who interviewed me. So that was really my first role. It was funny because I went up to Seth. I'm like, hey, Seth, I really love Treasury. I did it for my internship. I audited financial institutions, and now auditing Treasury here, I can see myself being here. I get a call like maybe a couple months after and saying, hey, I got an opening. It's a mid-office job. It does X, Y, and Z. And I didn't even care about the role. I more cared about being in Treasury. And Seth gave me that opportunity. He hired me. And I ended up working for Seth for a couple of years, doing back office, mid office, reconciling short-term borrowings and investments, and kind of working through that. So getting to learn more about what Treasury does. And then I was a backup cash desk for when the cash desk professional wasn't there. And then I kind of did that. And then when she went on maternity leave, I took over the cash desk for a little bit of time. Had a lot of fun doing that. And what I learned in that role, and what Seth really did a nice job on, is teaching me how it all comes together from an operational perspective. And I think that is so critical in Treasury, to understand how it all comes together, what systems you need, how do you bring the cash in, how do you make sure the liquidity is there when you need it, and keeping thinking about how to automate. And Seth, like he was a great mentor for my first Treasury job, because to this day, I still have that same mindset. And so it kind of traveled with me. And then I did cash management. And so after working like for 18 months, 2 years with Seth, I moved over to the cash management department. I worked on the Yum disposition and offering there. So that was fun to do. We had create a treasury organization for young brands. So we carve out all the bank accounts, move them over to Young. We had to make sure all the operations were there, all the systems. So you got a good feel for how and that was my first M&A deal ever. And so that's where I also loved the other side of treasury was the M&A side. And it's the integrating or the dispositions that you had, because you learn a lot about treasury that way as well. And that's where it started. And I never went back.
And let me ask on that. So and I remember, you and I have spoken about this maybe before, but Yum, obviously smaller group as a carve out and everything else. How do you right size treasury for that kind of organization? You're coming from a mega major. We had recently Predicto Bagchi, he was one of my guests. He was at Pepsi, and we were talking about you're in a big blue chip that, we'll come onto your GE experience. You're like massive. And then suddenly you're doing a carve out for a smaller group. Again, for the listeners, if someone's doing that, it doesn't right size just straight across, does it? What's that like?
So like for me, I was really young, right?
Yeah.
So here I am, 26 years old, working on this enormous, disposition. And it was, if you think about restaurants and you think about cash management for a restaurant or treasury operations, it's very operational.
Yeah.
So here's just to give you an idea, the treasury department probably did more work around the restaurant side from the cash management side than they did for the regular Pepsi. So if you think about each restaurant had its own bank account, and each restaurant produced cash flows that needed to get deposited. So you had about 28,000 bank accounts for 28,000 locations. So it was not an easy operation. So the treasury department actually became really big on the operational side, but there was a lot of automation, right? A lot of drawdowns, a lot of all this, but to manage 30,000 or 28,000 bank accounts was quite a bit based on the restaurants. But not only did you manage it for the wholly owned, you also managed it for the franchisees. And so you have these two different business models that were there. So that was like my first insight to it. Still young, not really comprehending what was going on, but thinking back 30 plus years ago, it was amazing the work that I got to do based on that. So for me, that was my first really good understanding on how to build a standalone treasury department for a standalone public company. And it became Yum. So, again, got the opportunity, you took the opportunity, you learned from it. You quite didn't know what you were doing back then, but you kind of know now and saying, wow, that was a great experience to do that. And so we had fun. It was a good experience for me.
And then, so the next moves, talk us through those, because you kept going.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. So I'm in treasury, kind of do all the stuff, but then you're hanging out with all your friends and they all did the same thing you did, public accounting, internal audit, but they went to FP&A.
Yeah.
And I started questioning myself, like, do I want to try FP&A? The opportunities were kind of getting smaller and smaller in treasury. So I decided that this was probably a good point to go try something else. And what was nice, I was still young in my career. And this is the time that it was I kind of came to the realization, this is the time to try something different. And I thought about it as a two-way door. I thought about it as I can go out, I can learn something new. And if I don't like it, I can come back to treasury.
Yeah.
And so this craft opportunity came up. I had a friend of mine who worked at Kraft that I worked with at KPMG. We were out one night with some friends. She's like, we're looking for somebody. This is probably a good role that you want to try. It's the FP&A leader for Breyers Yogurt. So you kind of were like a mini CFO for Breyers Yogurt. And I said, you know what? I think I might want to try that. So I did that. I did that role probably for about almost 18 months and got to learn the FP&A, the operating plans, putting together marketing plans. And it was funny because every Monday, I remember this to T, was a big day for me, because I get to pull down all the results of the week of what we sold and then report out Monday afternoon the success we had or not the success, the plan we had for Breyers Yogurt. And so you kind of get a feel for the importance of your day-to-day operations in a business unit. And I love that. And I felt like I was that little CFO. I got to do all that, put marketing plans together, figure out what the shrinkage is going to be because yogurt, goes bad and there's the shelf life there. And then when you come up with a new product, how does that product, how do we price it? And then how do we make sure that we get it on the shelf? And these are all the great things I got to work on. Again, here I am at 26, 27 years old, kind of working on some of these cool things. And then I worked on the project that bought yogurt from 8 ounces to 6 ounces. And what was the cost benefit of that? And you got to kind of work through the models of doing that and making the company a little bit more profitable. So you kind of got a good feel, but deep down inside, I was still missing treasury. And it was like, yep. And so there was this opportunity to be the assistant treasurer at a young age for a company called Air Express International that was based in Connecticut. And the treasurer was ready to retire in the next couple of years. So they wanted to bring in someone who could take over that role. So I already started planning like, yeah, I would love to be a treasurer one day. Let me do this assistant treasurer. And because the company was small, you were the jack of all trades. So I did all the FX, I did all the investing, I did, the borrowings. So you kind of got a feel for the whole treasury suite. And I got to do that. It's a small company.
And tell us about who Air Express were, just so that you and I know this, but again, what the dimensions of treasury were for them.
Yeah. So Air Express International was a logistics company that worked just like a DHL or a FedEx, but they did specialty products and specialty packages that FX and DHL couldn't do. And so it was about a $5 billion industry, a company. And they were in about every country because they had to move product to every country. So FX, I got to learn about FX exposure very quickly on when to sell, when to buy, when to hold on to the exposure, not hold on to the exposure, when you want to go long, when you want to be short. So that was kind of a good learning from that perspective. Also setting up bank accounts in all these countries. So I got to work in some of the remote countries to kind of get these accounts set up in the operations there with the company. So it gave me a good feel for being broader. And like when I was at PepsiCo, it was already kind of established, right? It was an established company. It was very mature. You walked in there. It was a great place to learn, but you really couldn't add that much value. Here was a little bit different because this company was growing. It was going country to country. It was delivering products to new jurisdictions, and you had to kind of set that up. And I was kind of loving that. And working under the gun and being able to get accounts set up fairly quickly, understanding the culture of the country that you're going to be in, kind of gave me that broad treasury experience that I was lacking from being very specialized at PepsiCo in really the cash management operation side of the house. So now I kind of started building my suite up. And so now you got your cash management, you got your back office, and now I got my front end from investing and FX, and then I got issuing debt. And so now the suite started getting bigger and bigger. And so it was great. And then the company was bought out by Deutsche Post, which is owns DHL, which is DHL today. Yeah. And so I was there and they were going to make me the regional treasury for the Americas, which was great for me because that was a big role, a lot larger than it would have been staying at Air Express International. But I was at a networking, and this is why networking is so important. I was at a KPMG networking event, and it was an old partner that I used to work for, Greg Hansen from KPMG. And we did some audits together, and he came over and said, "Hey, what are you doing now?" I was like, "Hey, I'm working at Air Express. I'm the assistant treasurer, just got bought out, and I'm going to be the regional treasurer for Deutsche Post in the US for the Americas." He's like, "Oh, that's a great role. It's funny because I'm the CFO of GE Capital Real Estate, and I'm looking for a treasurer right now. Would you come back and work for me?" And I'm like, I got this opportunity. So now I was stuck between what I wanted and what I thought I wanted, or it's GE. And living in Connecticut, GE was always that staple, right? Everyone kind of inspired to work for a GE. And so for me, it kind of was a no-brainer. And I knew Greg really well. I didn't really know Deutsche Post really well. They were a company that just bought us out. So it kind of said, all right, Greg, you know what? I'm going to give this a chance. Yeah. And that was the year 2000. And I moved over to be the treasurer for GE Capital Real Estate. And so it was kind of fun being there because when I got there, the company was about maybe 15 billion in assets at 2000. When I left real estate to go to a different division in 2008, real estate was 92 billion in assets.
Yeah,
so
crazy.
I grew through that and I learned a lot about the real estate industry. I learned about securitizations. So now as we talk about your progression as a treasurer, cash management, back office, doing the cash desk, doing FX. Now, all of a sudden I got securitizations in my portfolio and all of a sudden the accounting standards changed to FAS 133 and I got derivative accounting in mind because we had a bunch of derivatives on our books. Then we had the Enron happen during that time and the accounting changed for SPVs. So I had to unwind some of the structures that were put in place that were off-book SPVs. So if you think about all this experience starting to kind of pile up now, and I'm building my suite, and I think of it as a treasury workstation, right? As a human, and you're kind of building up all these different facets of treasury and getting every opportunity that you are. And maybe it's luck, right? That you happen to be in these times that everything happened. So as we think about it, it was a treasurer of real estate, did a really nice job, worked really hard, and talking to my second mentor, who was a CFO of real estate. It wasn't Greg, because Greg had retired. It was Stuart Koningsberg, who was the CFO of real estate, really gave me the opportunity, put me in front of Jeff Bornstein, the CFO for all of GE Capital, and kind of gave me the opportunity to prove myself, show him a lot of things that I was working on. And then we get to a point where GE Capital was splitting in two.
Yeah.
And so now we had the consumer side and the commercial side. And Jeff asked me to be his treasurer for the commercial side of GE Capital. And I thought that was, for me, like amazing to work for Jeff and do that. And that's where I got the opportunity to do just not real estate, but all of commercial finance. So now you're talking about asset-backed lending. So you're getting more experience and you're thinking about all these experiences that you're picking up along the way. And again, here I am in 2006, Jeff calls me into his office. He's like, "Hey, Tony, I got a banking license, but we don't know what we should do with this banking license. You take a look at this in Utah and the ILC. Can you work with the businesses and try to figure out how we can use this banking license to our advantage?" And so this is like 2006. I'm like, I don't know anything about banking and licenses. But again, here's another challenge and opportunity and a hard one to kind of do. So I started working with the businesses and we started learning more about the ILCs, what they do, what they can't do, what kind of assets can we put in there? How would we raise deposits? And next thing you know we're building up a bank in Utah under the ILC regulations. And we grew it to $45 billion assets and deposits.
And for someone listening today and thinking that they're in corporate, they're enjoying the corporate side, how did this change you as a treasurer? How did this improve you? Because I know you talked about that a little bit on stage and you and I have talked about it as well, because I recruited loads for GE and, did stuff for Adam, in London, and we did a lot of the other things. But why is that important to build that suite of treasury expertise outside of just your core corporate stuff?
Yeah. So if you think about what we just talked about, running operations for some of the largest companies, right? So if you think about, we talked about PepsiCo with the restaurants having 29,000 bank accounts and getting all the cash in. And then you talk about raising liquidity, FX. So now you have all these suites of good, solid, skills that you can kind of use. And then you get to a bank, and a bank is completely different than a corporate. And now all of a sudden you have all these standards that you have to follow from a regulatory perspective. So if you think about all the control environment that you're used to learn from your audit days, from a strong control environment, what looks like strong, what looks like weak and you want to kind of build to a strong control environment, take all that and you're like, okay, how do I do a bank? And so I've never done banks before, except for audits, right? And in my audits, all I've done is I was just auditing loan reserves. I was auditing to make sure that the receipts matched 3 days before the quarter closed, 3 days after the quarter closed to make sure the timing was off. And, you just audited cash with bank account statements. So, and now you're at a bank and now you need to build out all the controls and the control environment through what's called an ALCO process. I've never done an ALCO before. I had no idea. And
well, imagine, I walked in the door when I was Robert Walters many years ago, and they said, we need someone to recruit a head of ALM. I want, what's ALM? And they went, you're recruiting this. And I did it for Barclays and did it for NatWest. And people said, oh, was it good fun? I said, no, fun's not a word I would use. It was character building. And, literally, Monte Carlo, VAR, and people are like, what's value at risk? I went, well, I can tell you, but you don't want to know. You need another coffee. And they were like, okay. And it was, as you say, it was great for now we still focus on corporate, but now I've got that knowledge like you, as you say, it's character building, should we say?
Yeah. And if you think about this, back in 2006,
yes,
the internet was okay, but it wasn't great. No. It's not like I can type in there, hey, what does an ALCO look like? And it's going to spit out an ALCO. So you had to kind of learn this stuff through sitting with the regulators, what's required, sitting through people that worked at GE Capital, that worked for a bank before, and saying, hey, have you ever heard of this ALCO thing? Yeah. Like, how do you think about this stuff? And like, I'm a corporate guy, right? And real estate. And here I am trying to build the infrastructure for a bank. But the good news is we worked with some great people. We worked with some great resourceful people who were really smart on putting this together. We sat with the regulators. Regulators told us what was required to do, and we did it. Yeah. And this is where I learned the concept of FastWorks, which is build what your end product should look like, and then go back and continue to make it better and better and better. Yeah. A lot of people, when they take a project on to build, they start from the beginning and they work all the way to the end. Here, you didn't have time because you needed to build this bank quickly to move assets in there to start getting deposits. So we had to build a quick ALCO. So we started with the framework. We built the framework based on the ALCO. And then what we did is we refined it as we went. And then, your first audit's not going to be great with the local regulators, but you're going to learn from that. And then you're going to be better. And then your second audit's going to be a little bit better. And then your third audit's going to be a lot better because you're taking everything that they're telling you and you're learning and you're getting better at it. And, so this is where I was introduced to doing a really tight ALCO. And I got to tell you, it's probably one of the best things I've ever learned how to do. Then I get tapped. So I finished that assignment. I was at probably the ILC for about 2 years. Banking crisis happens. And here I am at GE Capital and working night and day, 24/7, as we are working through the liquidity crisis and making sure we can stand up liquidity to where we need to be to get ourselves through this crisis. Not only did I learn, I lost 10 years of my life going through that, but I've learned a lot of the right way to think about liquidity and ALCO, because this is where you're really testing your ALCO. And this is where you really think how well you stress test your portfolio. And this is when you learn what we should have done compared to what was done. So a lot of learnings from 2008, a lot of cleanup. I'm happy that we were able to get ourselves through it. Came with a lot of pain, but also a lot of learnings.
Our podcast is sponsored by ICD. ICD are an independent platform trusted by thousands of treasury professionals worldwide to manage short-term investments. One global treasurer recently told me it was one of the smartest technology decisions they've made. No license fees, rapid setup, and tangible returns. If you're looking for a smarter, simpler way to manage your liquidity, then head to find out more at our partners page, treasuryrecruitment.com/partners, and find out much more. Let's get back to the episode. When you're in that banking side of things and you come from industrial side, you're there, as you say, stress testing. Some people go, I don't understand what stress testing. I got to know it. As you said, I had to sit with all these banking treasurers. They taught me, bless them, they were very patient. But we were talking about liquidity buffers and things that if a bad event happens, something with the economy or whatever, you've got to have enough, basically money in the bank, really, to cover it. Is that the best way you would describe it?
Yeah. So I created my own term for this. Yeah. I call it survival horizon. And what I think about a survival horizon is how much liquidity do you need to survive any downturn in the market? And that's why I call it a survival horizon.
And it was described quite similarly. We had Brendan Boucher, who's actually one of my guests at Treasury Career Corner Live in London in November. And it always stuck with me that it was pre-lockdown. He was one of my guests, so quite a few years ago now. And he was at Compass Group. He is now still. And the CFO did a very similar. They did scenario planning. They're a food services business going into lockdown. They went, right, so how much should we, try and draw down? How much should we arrange the facility? He went, everything. He went, what? He went, and this is on the tape, so it was approved. He said, get everything. He said, we're never going to get in trouble for for surviving, are we?
Right.
Plan for the worst. And they did, and they didn't use it all. But the fact was they were then able to make decisions on the back of that, which helps you as well. And you went through that. And then you did the GE Capital Rock, but then went back into industrial. Then, want to then get onto Amazon.
Well, it gets a little bit better. It gets a little bit better. So and this gets a little fun. So after creating the ILC, I get another tap on the shoulder. I need you to go to London. I need you to be the treasurer for global banking. We have about $98 billion of assets in about 40 different countries and the banks that we own in those countries. And I need you to think about how we get the funding through deposits again, and how do we bring all those banks under one holding company? And then it's like, oh, that sounds hard.
Yeah. Sure.
And I'm like, I just did this little ILC that we had our own assets, that we moved the assets into the ILC, and we did broker deposits to fund it. Now you're asking me about these banks that are in like Romania, Latvia, Russia, and Hungary, and putting all these banks under one structure, finding a funding solution for all these banks, and making sure all the outgoes in these banks are running separately. So you have 40 to 60 different banks. And then I was like, wow, this sounds really hard. He's like, just do me this favor, do this for me. I promise you, I'll get you back, and I'll get you in a great role on your way back. So they kind of promised me to say, help me out here. And I says, all right, I'm going to try this. Yeah. So I pick up and move my family to London. We were there for 4 years and working through this project. And I was looking at stuff that I'd never seen before. And I was actually quite nervous. My first couple months there, I remember sitting with Robert Greene, who was the CFO of global banking at the time. And I'm like, Robert, I don't know if I can perform. I don't know if I could do this. This is way over my head. He's like, I got faith in you. And there's like you pick up these mentors along the way, and working with Robert was amazing. He always had a way of making you feel good about what you can do. And if you start doubting yourself, he always brought back the positives that you did for the company. It's like, look, I saw what you did at the ILC. You can do this. And he had a way of making you focus on what was important and taking the noise away. So what he really did for me is he said, don't worry about all the noise that's happening around. Think about what we're trying to get to here. We're trying to get all these banks under one entity, put them in one structure, and get the funding structure set up for these, and making sure that all the outgoes are intact with the local regulatory requirements, as well as the UK regulatory requirements. So spending a lot of time with different regulators, working with the UK regulators, making sure that we establish this entity according to the right regs. And he got me focused, got me on to, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and when you had this great phrase that you used the other day, it said about winning the day,
Yes.
getting through and having your tickness and winning the day. Was that perhaps where it started, or had it already begun, or where was it?
Yeah. So what I learned in that role is really how to take something that's so massive and start focusing on what's really important and what the end game is. And as I learned from one of my mentees on Win the Day, like, it was funny when she told me that, it kind of resonated because it's kind of like the way I was doing things on my own. And I talked about when I make my lists and I get through the lists and I go and do all the I's through it, I start doing all the win the days and then getting through it, and it makes you feel really good, but it makes you focused. And that's what Robert Greene did for me, is actually help me get to what's important and prioritize how to get the right things done at the right time. So you're not lost in the world of noise.
Yeah.
Cause that happens. And it was just a big undertaking, that took us 4 years to do, but we did it. And again, it was like one of those things that I look back, and that's kind of like one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. And to think about the accomplishments that we did, we're able to put these banks in a holding company. We're able to start selling some of these banks off out of the holding company. I mean, it was just a success story all the way. It's unfortunate that we had to do what we had to do because of the crisis, but it actually was a great learning experience. And also taking on a project that you knew that you were not qualified to do, but you were able to accomplish it. And that was a really good, and that really built up my confidence. And again, to this day, Robert sits on one of those pedestals as a great mentor on doing it. And it's funny how you get mentors in different parts of your life that have that meaning. Like each one of my mentors was there for me at the time where I needed that experience that I didn't have. And that's what made it great. Cause then when I think about today where I sit, and now I'm a mentor to people in certain parts of their career and helping them understand the different building blocks that you need to kind of build the confidence that you need to be who you are. Cause it really is confidence in courage, right? You need the courage. If you don't have the courage to do stuff, you'll never take that chance. And then you'll always be risk adverse and you'll be status quo. And it's almost like swinging for the stars, right? I always think about like baseball, and the only way you're going to get a home run is if you connect and you have the perfect swing and the perfect speed, but that's hard to do. That's why people's averages are, 55 home runs in a year is really good, because not everyone's an Aaron Judge. And your batting average, which is a decent batting average, is about 250 to 300, right? So if you think about that, that's kind of what you're doing. And your number's not going to always hit a home run, but you got to try to play small ball and keep getting yourself on base and making your way around. And then when it's time to hit that home run, you're going to try to hit that home run. So,
and then you'd had this incredible, time at GE, and then talk us through what happened next and how you joined Amazon and things. Cause again,
yeah. So, I came back from London and they made me the industrial treasurer. And this is where I started taking the ALCO concept and building it into a corporate America style. And we started doing that for the industrial company. And so we kind of built this really robust enterprise risk management deck for the senior leadership of GE company. And I'm mostly for the industrial side. And it was a success because it kind of gave the liquidity requirements for the company, how much cash the company needs to operate, where we weren't doing so well. So we were able to kind of find some issues that we needed to deal with on that perspective. And it all came from the ALCO concept. I'm building it out. So that's where I kind of build out my scenario testing today here at Amazon. So I do the industrial treasurer role. They asked me to do the Alstom integration in France. So buying a European company that was a smaller GE energy company and integrating it in and working on getting the deal done. So I was kind of on the deal team, and I saw all the facets of buying a large international company. And on top of that, a French international company, because cultures don't match, right? So now you had to bring the two cultures together. So I kind of learned a lot about how different cultures work, different local requirements for employment. So you learn a lot, and you learn, we have the Federal Trade Commission here. They have their own version, what you can and can't do, how you buy it. So great experience. I get back, we're selling GE appliances. Tony, can you create a treasury infrastructure for GE appliances to make it standalone? Because we were very centralized in GE. Treasury was done at the corporate level, and we did all the treasury on behalf of all our businesses. Now we had to make a standalone. And to me, that was just another opportunity for me to take everything I've ever learned and build it. And sitting with the buyer of GE appliances and the treasurer there and saying, okay, I'm going to build this out for you. What would you like me to do for you? And she said to me, and this just resonates, do how you would do it if you were the treasurer of GE appliances. And I'm like, really? She trusted me she didn't even, she just met me for the first 20 minutes,
Yeah.
but she trusted the fact that of all my experiences, because she had my CV, she saw everything I did, and she had the confidence in me to build her the highest standard treasury organization. And that's what we did. We bought a treasury workstation. We created a treasury organization. We built up the team. We built up the systems. We built in the processes. We decoupled it from GE company and made it a standalone treasury organization. Fantastic. So going back in history, all done, feeling really good, created my own treasury infrastructure for this standalone company, which could be a Fortune 100 business on its own, because GE Appliances is a fairly large company and worldwide. And then it gave me that another insight to, how to create a whole treasury organization. I get a call when I get back from Amazon saying, "Hey, your name popped up." It was an executive recruiter from Amazon saying, "We would love for you to have an opportunity to speak with our treasurer if you're thinking about it." So I said, "All right." I said, let me call. This is 2016. Yeah. Amazon was large, but it wasn't where it was. And it was a growing company. And, it was always fascinated by the growth of the company, of where they started from selling books and albums to where they were in 2016. I went, did the interview there, got to really like the fact that they didn't have a lot of the same processes and systems because they were still growing, and they needed someone to come in and help them take them to the next level. So and for me, I was like, wow, this could be a great opportunity to build again and build it for a company that I think is going to be one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, this could be the next GE.
Yeah.
And I said, this could be a great opportunity for me, but it was an AT role. And for me, it was kind of like going backwards a little bit in my career, but this was an opportunity for me to say, you know what? I can have fun doing this. And if this all works out for me, it could be a good thing. And so I thought that way. So I took that risk. I took a step back to take a step forward. And I did exactly that. And it was the right decision. And again, we talked about this before. It's the courage in taking that risk and doing something you're not comfortable with, because most treasury people are risk adverse. Yeah, and would never take a risk like that. I was happy. I love GE. I thought I was going to retire at GE, but this opportunity to do something different and build and be in an entrepreneur environment kind of suited me. It's kind of who I am, and kind of a scrappy kind of guy, right? So for me, that was a perfect opportunity to build again. So roll up my sleeves, get into it. And then how do we ensure that what happened to GE in 2008 never happens at Amazon? And that was my interview point with Brian. So at the time, Brian was the CFO. He's like, "Hey, how do you think you can add value to Amazon in this role?" That was the question. I remember to this day. And I said, "Brian, the way I look at it is I lived through 2008. I never want to live through that again.
I don't want to do it again.
I want to make sure that never happens here at Amazon."
Yeah.
And to this day, we still talk, we joke about that. And because we had to go through COVID a little bit. We weren't really sure. So you had that uncertainty time. So, and then, we had to build time. So we got through it. We got through it because I built all the things I learned from day one, from my PepsiCo days of learning the operations and how to use the systems and the processes, to my days of Air Express International, of working in jurisdictions that you would never think about working in, like the Angolas and the Mozambiques of the world. Like you start thinking about that, and then all of a sudden you're taking all those things you learned and you're building this out in a company that is growing.
And when you came in, at the top of the show, I talked about some of the principles of Amazon, and that you really grabbed those, didn't you, as well? But I know that when you first, the GE culture to Amazon was a transition, and you lent into that, but it was challenging at times.
It was. I would say my first couple of months here were challenging and understanding what an entrepreneur culture was really all about and building. And like you kind of always look at over your shoulder, like, am I doing this right? And you had that kind of fear. I had some fear, and that was the worst thing for me. Having fear is not a good thing. And I was kind of like lost my confidence a little bit. So I had to kind of find myself. because it was a hard environment, because it was so entrepreneur that the business units kind of want to do their own thing, and it's hard to kind of break in. And for me, I kind of felt like an outsider, and I didn't have that culture because I came from a culture that was similar in building and growing and getting into new jurisdictions and new products all the time. But it was just a little different from an entrepreneur to a company that was less than 20 years old to a company that was 125 years old. And it was a little bit harder for me, but I had to do some soul searching. And what I did is I found out the type of person I was and what I wanted in my values and what I wanted to get out of this role. Like I actually, at one point, I actually doubted myself. I'm like, oh my God, did I make a mistake? Did I leave a company that I absolutely love to do this? And I'm finding myself struggling here. But once I sat down, I kind of figured out the type of leader I wanted to be. And when I put together the 4 core values of my own values, I said, these are the values that are going to make me successful here at Amazon. And for me, it was fortitude. It's my passion. It's my creativity for creating processes, and it's grace. And the reason why I call it grace is for my grandmother. And the one thing I learned in my entire career is you needed to treat others the way you wanted to be treated. You can't come in here and tell people what to do. And you can't tell them they're doing something wrong. You need to work with them and respect them, because the way they're doing it is they created their culture. So for me, I had to kind of take a step back and saying, yes, the respect, the listening, the working together all came into effect in all those. So when you think about fortitude, is fighting through those hard times, the adversity, right? It's my passion that I see something and I want to build, and I build that passion to help me get through any downtime that I have. And then my creativity and innovation. How am I going to innovate in this role? And to me, that resonated the most in a culture like Amazon, where it's entrepreneur, it's building, it's creating new processes, creating new products, and then the grace part of it. And to me, the grace is probably what gets you through it, is just treating people the way you want to, making sure you're a likable person. And I think this is a lot of mistake a lot of people make, is they're not, they focus so much on the core of what I need to deliver, and they forget about them as a person. And you want to be likable so people trust you, because if you're not likable, the trust isn't coming. And yeah, maybe your work will show it, but you need to have that trust. So you need to kind of build those relationships. It's really important. And I find that out later in life, right? Because like for me, in my 30s and 40s, I'm pumping, right? I'm not even thinking about anyone else but myself and how can I get this accomplished? And I'm knocking walls down and I'm doing everything. And then at this point in my career, I take a step back and it's like, that's not who I am anymore. I'm a different leader now. I'm a leader that's going to build talent and make sure that this company is set up for success with a succession plan, and making sure everyone sees the world the way I saw the world from when I was 22 years old to how I see it today, and look at all the different crises that I lived through. You know, I've lived through 3 big recessions. I lived through a banking crisis. I lived through COVID, and you put all that together, and all those learning experiences, and making sure that the next treasurer is set up for success, and as well as the industry. And for me, I'm giving a lot back to the industry to think about the things that I've seen, because I remember when I was a new kid on the block, a lot of the treasurers have been in their roles forever. And then I was like, wow, I'm looking up to these treasurers of Apple, Gary at Apple, Tony at PayPal. And I'm like, these are like to me, they're the heroes, right? They started it, but then now I'm where they were. Yeah. And I'm like needing to do the exact same thing that they did, and helping the new treasurers understand some of the facets of Treasury and how do we make Treasury better for everyone that comes into Treasury today. So for me, setting up those core values was really important, building and doing what I was doing and getting the company to success. And that's kind of where I am today. And I think for me, probably the best thing I ever did was take this role as a person, as an individual. And it really, I kind of inspired myself to create these roles. And we talk about this a lot. And I mentioned this in the thing is like, when you build out your control and you trying to figure out what kind of leader you are, people have a tendency to read these books. And we talked about this and they get these self-help books and saying, hey, this treasurer or this CFO or this CEO did these 10 things to get to where they are today. But that's that CEO. That's not who you are. You need to write your own book. And I'm going to continue to say that all throughout, like until I die, is you own your own destiny. Everything you do because you want to be the best of who you are, not the best of the Jeff Immelt books of the world or the Jack Welch books or the Elon Musk. Yes, they're really successful and maybe some of the things that they did resonate with you, but that's not who you are. Yeah. You're different. So you kind of have to do it yourself. And that was that, that aha moment for me is when I came up with those 4 core values of who I am as a leader and who I want to be. And that kind of resonated with me to this day. So I do that with my mentees and I kind of have them think through what's important to you. What do you want to get out of life? Like, what are your values? And then like for me, I'm a big black book moleskin person. I have about 300 of these in my closet throughout my whole career. And every time I get a new one, my first page is that page it's a picture of my daughter and I and my 4 core values in every book. And that's kind of reminds me of who I am and why I do what I do. And so all comes back 360 to where we are today. And it's great. It's, for me, I couldn't have done it any better. But times are tough. So go back on that.
And I mean, we could leave it there. I'm not going to, because the other thing that you and I were just talking about is that's your internal a little bit, but also you've got this other internal, or being a trusted partner. As you said to me back before we kicked off the show, you said about how you're spreading the good word of Treasury around the organization, around Amazon, and how that's also evolved, with you. Can you talk to that before, we will come to, I know you've got other meetings.
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about, like, I think treasurers now have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And if you think about the volatility that's in the marketplace today, I think a lot of people are on edge. I know I am. And now your expertise is needed. And I find myself that I do have a seat at the table.
So you and I are going to reconnect. We just talked before the show at AFP. Hopefully have a nice conversation so we can announce that on the show. So people are going to look out for that one. But as we do each and every week, you're a busy man. We're going to put your LinkedIn details in the show notes. Takeaways from today's show. I mean, we've covered so much, it's been brilliant, but you looking back, if you were more early years of your career or a bit, you've touched on it a bit with more experienced treasurers. What are the takeaways you give?
For me, as I think about building the most successful and well-rounded treasurer, it's taking every experience that comes from you and learning from it. So learn and be curious, which is one of our leadership principles, is probably one of the most important things, because you're learning every day. And today we have an opportunity to build out treasury with using AI to make our jobs even better and to do even better analysis and analytics. So the learn and be curious is really important. We talked about the customer obsession, is making sure that you're delivering for your customers, making sure that you're building the processes and having the ample opportunity for your business partners to continue to grow, and making sure you can help them understand the risks that are out there from an exposure perspective. Really critical. And in number 3, we talked about, when I talk about mine being grace, we talk about the networking, how important it is. It's also important to be a likable person, to make sure that you can earn trust with your senior leaders and also with your banking partners. Everyone forgets that, your banks that are with you, they're not a commodity. They're your partners. You need them just as much as they need you. Yeah. So you got to build those relationships up, because when you find yourself in the jam and you pick up that phone and you call your banking partner, you want them to be there for you. And it's really important to make sure that you build those relationships and you build those partnerships with the banks. and your business units, which we talked about earlier, as well as your staff. And if you're not continuing to develop your staff and build the treasury leaders of tomorrow, you're not a good leader. And it's so important. And the most important thing about being a leader is about developing the staff. And again, we really didn't talk a lot about it, but that's why I love the junior achievements model, is teaching young kids about business and finances, because you don't learn that growing up. You learn that after, and you learn, like when you go to university as a senior, a lot of us haven't taken one business course. So how do you know what it's like to be a finance person? You don't. And so giving opportunities to the young to understand what treasury is all about, what finance is all about, and doing it through these programs like Junior Achievements or Jumpstart or internships that you have with college undergrad and graduate really helps. And that's kind of why I keep myself close to those organizations, as well as our internship program here, and giving everyone an opportunity to learn about finance. So those kind of in the nutshell. I know we couldn't cover it all, Mike, on this one.
We'll do it. We'll follow up. We'll keep going. I've got to say, it was worth waiting 400 episodes or 399 to get to this point. 7 years in the making. Great. I'm just thrilled. Thank you, sir. It's been great to reconnect.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to part 2, because there's so much more we can talk about. We didn't talk about current events. We didn't talk about how we think about, stressing the portfolio in today's environment, and then what we should be thinking about. Love it.
It's like, look forward to it. So thanks very much.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Sounds great. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Today's episode of the Treasury Career Corner was brought to you with the support of our partners, ICD. If you're looking for a smarter way to manage your short-term investments, ICD's independent portal gives you access to a full range of investment products, integrated analytics, and a simple centralized platform built specifically for Treasury. If you head over to treasuryrecruitment.com/partners, you can learn more, and we'll be able to connect you with the right person at ICD for both you and your business. Many thanks for listening to the show, and thanks for your continued support.